Yo, what is up, everybody? I know what you're thinking, Mac. What the hell are you doing here on a Thursday? Well, Jason needed some much deserved time off, so you're stuck with me, Mac, who typically is on the B side of our sports related show Beyond the Red Zone. Um, but today, before we get into this, I'm gonna go through the pitch, the boilerplate, if you will. TIR is only as good as you listeners and subscribers make it, but we could do even better if more of you would subscribe. So, if you want access to like the champagne room, some other bonus content, the TIR chat on Patreon, head over to patreon.com/T This is Revolution, become a subscriber, and throw us a few of those ducats that you have earned through your toil surviving late stage capitalism. But with that being said, I have recently come across the news bit where the owner of the Washington Wizards and the Washington Capitals of the NHL have decided to move the team from Washington, D.C. to Alexandria, Virginia. And it kind of sent me down into kind of a rabbit hole of what is actually a bane on civil society, which is the publicly financing of sports stadiums. So today, I'm joined by a guest who is a mentor and friend of mine. He was one of my professors at the University of North Carolina, Pembroke. He is currently a professor and director of the African American Studies program at Western Carolina University. And this man, the effervescent, the amazing, the man, the myth, the legend, it's Dr. David Walton. And give me 1 second, guys. I'm still learning how to do this. There he is. All right. What up, Dave? How are you, man?
I'm doing well, Mac. How about yourself?
I'm surviving late stage capitalism, which is not fun at all, to say the least. But this is kind of a bugaboo to me, because I think we both love sports, but we have seen just the outlandish number of publicly financed stadiums in the last, probably, honestly, I'm going to blame Baltimore. With Camden Yards, when that opened in 93, this brand new sparkling baseball park, every other baseball team was like, well, maybe we can get ours like this. And then we saw it really start spreading out to the other big four. Now, I think it's important to really point this out. We're gonna get a little background here about the situation in DC because it's the most recent one. So Ted Leonsis is the guy who owns Monumental Sports and Entertainment. That's the parent company of both the Wizards and the Capitals, right? He wants to leave the Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C. Now, for people that don't know, this has been plopped down, the Capital One Arena, right in Chinatown, right? In D.C. Now, the biggest issue is that what happens when you put new and sparkly things into urban areas. What typically happens? Gentrification hits like a son of a bitch, right?
Indeed.
Right. So at one point in Chinatown, you had about 3,000 naturalized Chinese Americans, and nothing but privately, small businesses. And in the 26 years that thing's been open, there's only about 300 naturalized Chinese American citizens. A lot of gentrification, and they knocked out. I think they said 40% of the small businesses, as well as like 1,200 affordable housing units just to build Capital One Arena. So, we've seen it where we're seeing this kind of drift away from the cities where these teams are, going from like the city they're in to the burbs.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to ask you, what do you think is the primary driver of this?
Oh, great. Because then, for that particular question, moving from the city proper to the burbs. So we could look at it historically. That'll be the Detroit Lions. When they left downtown Detroit, went to the Pontiac Silverdome, which is in Pontiac, Michigan. They tore it down, was in Pontiac, Michigan, right? Oakland County. a very, very wealthy, wealthy county. Then we see it just recently with the baseball stadium for the Braves in Atlanta, leaving Atlanta and then moving to Cobb County, I believe. Similar things with both. Now, working class people, people from the community, now have a greater challenge of having access to the facility. They generally do not provide the infrastructure for public transportation. Similar example with when they moved to Pontiac with the Detroit Lions, and it's one bus that goes all the way down Telegraph to Pontiac. One bus. In the case of Atlanta, there's no integrated public transportation. So a poor kid couldn't come across a baseball ticket and take the MARTA train to get to the baseball stadium, right? So that cuts back on one access to those meager jobs, those uh, those minimum wage service industry jobs. That's all the stadiums bring is that. So it reduces access to those poor people to those jobs, right? And this we're talking about public finance money. One of the appeals that they use is we're going to bring jobs, right? But then you have the poor people, the working class people, the working poor who can't even get to those locations to take the jobs, right? What we have is, as you mentioned, the destruction of small moms and pops businesses that are eclipsed or ran into bankruptcy or to shutter their doors because they open similar venues, similar businesses within the stadium proper or on the stadium grounds. So we're talking also service industry related jobs, restaurants, sports bars, memorabilia shops. I even seen, but this is still inside the city. I went to Wrigley Field this summer to take some photos, right? And just but it's inside of Chicago still, so this doesn't apply in the proper right there, Browns, Boys Town, which is a whole nother story about what that means in
Yep.
Chicago, nonetheless. But right there, but then I also saw barbershops, salons inside that complex. So those are the types of things that are usually housed within these stadium complexes, right? So moving to the burbs, to put it quite simple, they're trying to escape poor people. More often than not, they're trying to escape black people. They're trying to escape poor black people, right? They got to deal with the people that's going to be outside trying to hustle up some money because there isn't any jobs. Hey, I'll take your picture for $5.
Yeah, or
Right.
they're selling the t-shirts and the hats that are half the price of what you buy in the team store.
Exactly.
Yep.
And then people who may own property near the facilities, parking money, parking revenue to allow people to park on their property. In Detroit with Ford Field, it was a big deal. They've done some things to mitigate that, buying up stuff so
Yep.
they can charge the $1 million hour parking for the game,
Yep.
$50, $100 for the game. Like all of those things are at play when you move it from the inner city, from a metropolis to the quote unquote burbs, right?
Yeah, and see, I'm
Uh,
glad you brought that up with Atlanta because I don't know if you know this, but part of their funding came from the infrastructure bill because to get out to Cobb, they had to expand the highways.
yeah.
So literally a federal
Mhm.
program to improve infrastructure and deal with the beat up roads. Let's face it, 95 and going all the way into Atlanta is awful. Um, was literally expanded with a federal program that was supposed to help
Mhm.
cities improve infrastructure.
Yes.
Um, but this is from the Washingtonian. The Capitals and Wizards are getting a new arena in Alexandria. Monumental Sports, which I already covered. It's going to be at the multi-purpose entertainment district, and I think we need to kind of put a pin in that, everybody. The multi-purpose entertainment district, because this is going beyond what Dave just said. This isn't just the promise of, he and I opening up a sports bar across the street from Ford Field. This is a multi-purpose entertainment district now. Okay, and it's going to be in Potomac Yard, right?
Hmm.
It's going to be a 70-acre campus with a 20,000 seat arena, have Monumental's corporate HQ, monumental sports network media studio, practice facilities for both teams, a 6,000 seat concert hall, and an esports center, along with new residential units, retail, restaurants, conference spaces, and hotels. Now, this is at the Potomac Yard Metro stop, and it's right off of Reagan Airport's South Runway, right? So this is build an innovation campus, Virginia, Andrea, and they're opening up their first classrooms in the same area. So I think this was a great point because, you know, DC, back in, I think into the early 80s, was a predominantly black city. Like I think that the African-American population was upwards of 70%.
Chocolate City is what it was called. Chocolate City.
Yeah. And that was brought up in a couple articles, right? Where they actually went out and talked to the people that are going to be affected by Capital One closing. And, you know, it's a shame because, you know, there's another few stadiums that are like, I don't know if you heard, but the Browns are talking about moving out of downtown Cleveland. Right. And keep in mind, their stadium is less than 30 years old. We are seeing more and more. The age of the century-old stadium is gone. Right. And I blame Atlanta for that because they got a free stadium essentially built with Olympic funds for the Braves. And that lasted, I think, all of 22 years before whatever they're calling it now, Truist Stadium in Cobb County. Right. So every stadium has to have the new bells and whistles. And because of the prestige of having a major league team, cities and municipalities that don't have money will bend over backwards to procure, you know, the funds to build these things. And I think this should be where we kind of talk about, before we get back into socioeconomic reasons, right? Let's just talk about some horrible publicly financed stadiums. And I'm going to go all the way back to 1976, everybody. A magical time, right? 1976. Disco still something, unfortunately. Americans realized they really love cocaine. And the Winter Olympics was in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Now, this was originally budgeted for $300 million and ended up being $1.5 billion, which would be almost $9 billion in today's money. And they didn't pay off the debt for these games until 2006, right? So 30 years later, they finally paid it off, right? And then you have, if you look at Lake Placid, what was done with all that infrastructure built for the Olympics there? Nothing. It has literally been rotting since 1980, right? If you look at the Rio Olympics in 2016, go look at some of those pictures, everybody. It's you know, Rio may not pay this off until the 2050s, and they are not using any of these stadiums.
Indeed. The World Cup is another good example. South Africa, they built all those stadiums. Now they just call them large toilet bowls because a lot of them look like toilet bowls. Unused since, what was it, 2008 World Cup in South Africa?
I believe
so. Unused. All those resources from the nation state, the poor nation state, to build these for the prestige of hosting the World Cup. And then all of those facilities are going unused because it's impossible to use that amount, particularly in that same thing with Rio with the Olympics. It's impossible for them to use all of those facilities after the games are over. The only slight difference in the United States is the multiple professional sports at the level that they are, and then those other events like concerts, in some places rodeos and things of that nature that are used in those facilities.
Yeah, I mean, the 93% of NFL stadiums are publicly owned, but everybody wants the Jerry Jones deal, right? Jerry Jones built that stadium in Arlington. He did it. So he puts on boxing matches, like you said. There's a ton of events, concerts. You know, like nothing really happens in Dallas anymore. It happens at the house that Jerry built, and that's in Arlington. You know, whether you like it or not, it's not Dallas, it's Arlington. It has its own name, you know. But like he put the money up for it, so I get it. He gets the revenue from it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if this, like, say Cleveland, if they put up 80% of the money to build a brand new stadium for the Browns, and Jimmy Haslam wants it covered. He wants a dome stadium so he can hold concerts there during the winter and other events, but he wants 80% of the revenue generated. Okay, but the city's going to be on the hook for the debt. And see, this leads me into Miami Marlins Park, right? Like, this is traditionally a very underperforming franchise. Had a horrible owner who just knew how to work people, and he had, this beautiful ballpark built in 2013. It came in about $630, but because of the way it was financed, there's about $2.5 billion at the end of it. And they took out, Miami-Dade County took out massive loans, like to 5 or 3% interest annually. So, I mean, let's face it, Miami, like we all see Miami on TV. It looks cool, like when you're on South Beach, but there's a ton of economically depressed areas there, especially in Little Havana where the stadium's at. And
Yes,
like you had already alluded to, we're going to build this stadium. It's going to bring jobs and businesses. And there's literally been one. That's been what's been grown up around this stadium, and then you look
and I
at like
guarantee
SoFi in
you,
LA and go ahead, Dave. I'm listening.
yeah, I was gonna say, and I guarantee you, it has forced other businesses to close. I
Oh,
guarantee that, and I
absolutely.
guarantee that some residential areas had to be raised and rezoned, and those things. So some communities were probably obliterated uh, as a result to build it there. And as you said, people had this perception of Miami. They're actually talking about a whole nother city. Miami Beach is a whole nother city. It is not Miami. I used to live in Homestead, Florida. That's south of Miami in Dade County. Most of Miami is poor Black and brown communities. Very poor. Poor beyond poor, if you
Yeah.
want to be honest with you. In the facilities, their public housing and stuff they live in, they're living in military style barracks. Is what most of their projects are. Most of their housing is, right? But we've seen that Jay-Z, they brought him on as a face. I think he was like a 5% investor or whatever, where they destroyed the whole community where he's from to build the stadium for the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, he was supposed to eventually take over ownership of that team. And I'm like, dude, I know he's got money. He doesn't have NBA owner money.
Exactly.
Like that's something else we could talk about. Like, honestly, there's a reason that, you know, I really believe the reason we're seeing these public stage to hell and gone, because you have like people like the Cronkies and the family that owns the Buccaneers. They also own English Premier League teams, and that is not something that is affordable. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Welcome to Wrexham, great documentary with Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney purchasing a lower tier English football club. Yeah, man, our goal is the EPL. Why? Why? You do not have the money to keep up facilities wise. You do not have the money to keep up with the transfer window. Like, that's nuts. And unless it's to leverage a sale, I don't know why you'd want to be an EPL. Like, it's absolutely nuts.
I agree. I agree. And I don't understand, just like someone mentioned Buffalo, and now we're going way back. Buffalo has been getting hold since they first was able to establish a franchise with the AFL, I believe, right? And it was all the lure they used was public funds to build this stadium. So Buffalo has been getting screwed years and years, stadium after stadium, because Buffalo is a great example. That happened right as Buffalo was depopulating because the manufacturing jobs dried up. So those two
Yeah.
things were happening at the same time. So what does that also lead to? Decrease in services of the local communities that live within that municipality because they can't afford it. They're servicing this debt. So to balance the budget, to tighten the belt, they had to reduce the infrastructure costs. To be quite honest with you,
Yeah.
throughout the rest of the city, when the Detroit Lions and the Pistons, because people forget the Pistons ran off and went to Oakland County as well,
Auburn Hills, right?
Palace of Auburn Hills. I remember when that stadium was built. Now it's closed down. Ain't been 30 years.
Yeah.
30, 35 at the most. It was the Bad Boys era when they opened the Palace of Auburn Hills. So we're talking about 35 years. We're talking like 89,
Yeah.
88, around that time, right? Uh, I mean, then first the Lions came back down, Ford Field. Public Dollars was part of that as well. Ford Field, Little Caesars Arena, where the Pistons play at now, right? They cross the street from one another. But you know, you get high police presence, very integrated and very upkept infrastructure. I mean, they even have street trolleys. They got multiple forms of public transportation in downtown Detroit, right? The high police presence, the infrastructure, the roads have been redone, lighting, all this stuff, right? This is even before they completed the renovation plan of downtown Detroit. Now you wouldn't recognize it from
Yeah.
10 years ago at all. I was just home this summer and I didn't recognize much of downtown Detroit. Uh, but, but the city itself, outside of that area, no infrastructure, no infrastructure at all. But all those hundreds of millions of dollars are going to services debt as well as provide the infrastructure for that facility to be used by sports fans and then entertainment fans, right?
Yeah. I mean, and this we'll just get into it now. Like the multi-purpose entertainment district has been the phrase in vogue for about a decade,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're not just building a stadium anymore. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
build hotels. We're going
Yep.
to build, you know, uh, you know, commercial areas where your favorite Buffalo Wild Wings will open up a place there.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind these are not going to be small mom and pop restaurants. They're going to
Mm-hmm.
be franchises
Corporate
or
corporate stores, yes.
yeah, corporate stores, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is we've seen and everybody, I'll put a link in the chat, but don't hold it against me. It's a Cato Institute study, but it
Mm-hmm.
was very well done. Um, 6 pages long that showed the economic impact that a professional sports team and stadium has on a city is negligible,
Mm-hmm.
negligible at best,
Mm-hmm.
right? Dave already hit on it. We are talking about minimum wage service jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know if you saw what is happening in Vegas right now. The stadium workers are part of the group of service workers in Vegas that are trying to unionize.
Mm-hmm.
So they just had 70 or 80 of them arrested for picketing. You know, um, we're seeing that this small club of professional sports owners, and keep in mind some of these people are so wealthy they own multiple teams in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that they're going to be anti-labor. They're not going to be really too concerned with paying people. And on top of that, for places like Cleveland Browns Stadium, it's not an all year round job. It's during this.
Exactly.
It's during the season.
Yep.
So these people have to work 2 to 3 jobs in a given year just to make ends meet.
Yes, I had a little cousin. He worked for Ford Field, and the best way I could describe it, he worked for events. That's the best way. All right, you get the home football games, and then the random concerts,
Yeah,
and where the way they are spaced out. Exactly, it's essentially a part-time job
yeah.
at best.
Where on an honestly, you're not making a whole ton of money doing it. Um, but these multi-purpose kind of like we're going to build a destination to get people to come to the city,
Mm.
right? I think what kills me most about is like kind of tying this back to the Wizards and the Capitals. The state of Virginia has cut funding for education so much. They spend $1,900 less on per student than every other state in the country, um, which is nuts. Absolutely nuts. Like, we're talking about servicing a debt load that could reach the billions of dollars. And some of these cities do not generate that in a year,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah.
how can we justify a cut of $1,900 per student? How do we justify closing libraries, public health clinics? How do we justify all that,
Mhm.
but then say we need a couple $1 billion to build a multi-purpose entertainment district?
Indeed. It's a great metaphor for the farce of trickle down economics, right? Because the argument they're going to give that is going to generate all this revenue through these various channels that's going to trickle down to the layperson in that community. That's what they argue, right? That's what they give these fancy presentations, hire these PR firms to help them put together their marketing campaign, their presentation materials to make essentially that argument, right? And then it's going to drum up. And then when you add in, this is going to be a destination place, right? And they're making an additional argument, which is the same that they do in third world countries, developing nations, the global south, of what? Tourism.
Yeah.
Right? That's the argument they're making. They're essentially making a neo-colonial argument and viewing these cities as eternalized economies that they can use their tax revenue for to further enrich themselves, to further strengthen themselves, to further make the area a destination for people like themselves.
Yeah. I mean, and that goes back to what, we were saying before. And I think this is the crux of the entire argument. We see we'll go 2 mile by 2 mile block where these facilities are at, right? And that might
Mhm.
be a little generous, but we'll just say 2 mile by 2 mile
Mhm.
that have billions of dollars invested in it. And if you're not from a place like Detroit or Cleveland, the roads are awful because the salt eats them.
Yes.
They're not maintained very well. Um, but hey, you're getting freshly paved roads. You're getting these trolley systems. You
Yep.
probably have a more robust bus system there that maybe stays, active a little later. And
Yes.
then you get outside that 2 mile by 2 mile block, and it's nothing.
Nothing.
Right now, and this is the kicker. The people that work these venues, like your cousin, I did it at a minor league stadium in high school where I sold peanuts and I
Mhm.
made $6.50 an hour. Um, you know, but the people that work these venues don't live in that 2 mile by 2 mile block, right? Like you said, we are looking at the complete revamping of entire downtowns, usually, right? Where the old guard, uh, probably with more rapidity, is being pushed out to allow these kind of uh, fuck it, we'll just call them neo-colonial consumers.
Mhm.
Okay, are knocking down um, their spaces. They're taking over their apartment buildings. I mean, I've seen in the areas around the stadiums in Cleveland where you had rents like in downtown that were maybe 400 or 500 bucks a month, and now you're looking at probably 28, 25, or $2,900 a month.
Yep.
Absolutely ridiculous, you
Yep.
know. But what happens, and this is I think what we have to look at as well is what happens when the old stadium closes,
Mhm.
what it does to the people around it.
Mhm.
Because everything that's been built up in Chinatown now, and I was there earlier this summer because I took my kids to see a concert in DC. Um, Not a big band, but it was pretty nice. The the place was in a basement bar. It was rad as hell. Kids had a great time.
Those the best.
They are too, man. I cannot do big stadium shows anymore. I just can't. Like, give me
Mm.
a small venue where I'm gonna get elbowed in the face in a pit, and I'm a happy camper, right?
Yeah.
But all these places that have built up around the stadium, what happens now? Like, how do we? I guess the question now is how do we fill that gap? And by we, I mean us, because we're the only ones that are going to be willing to do it. God knows DC has drug its feet on a lot of infrastructure and public spending. And I think that has a lot to do with Congress because
Mhm.
if anybody's not in on it, DC City Council and the mayor have a lot of pull. Their budget still has to be approved by Congress.
Mhm.
Um, but how do we do that, Dave? Like that's the like
Indeed.
how I have no clue because especially when you lose the jobs is bad as they are, that's still employment for somebody for like you said as many
Indeed.
events as you can get a year, right?
Indeed. Indeed.
Um, on top of that, a lot of the the housing is tied to you know the arena as well. You know, let's face it, when you've got asses in seats and you've got like the team employees there, damn right, you're gonna have the supers are gonna be out there to fix your AC in the summer. But what
Mhm.
happens when no one's living in these buildings anymore?
Exactly.
You know, um, so I think the kicker in all this is we're seeing, especially towns like Atlanta, DC, Detroit, right? I'm glad the Lions got back to Detroit. That's great. I don't like the vibe and rebuilding it. I saw it's happening in Cleveland, it's happening in Pittsburgh,
Mhm.
where all the locals are getting pushed out and all these
Yes.
goofy white dudes are showing up that have no idea about the town.
Mhm.
Um, but we are seeing a big. Usually, it's not Detroit going. The Lions going back to Detroit. We're seeing like we talked about. They're going to the burbs. And honestly, Leonsis had brought up the criminal aspect. DC's riddled with crime.
They
Right?
always going to bring that. That's code word for the darkies.
Yeah, I mean, and the Braves owner did the same thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, we know these people are trying to make money. And
Yes.
where, like you said, where the Braves go, Cobb County, very
Mhm.
affluent, very white county with money to spend.
Yep, and it created a whole new complex, a campus, shopping, high-end shopping, high-end restaurants, stuff that in theory for that location, for the residents in that area, that they can use that facility 24/7,
Yeah,
right? That will have jobs that can be all year round service industry jobs. Maybe you pay a little bit more than the same chain restaurant across town in Atlanta proper. However, the people that are going to be working those jobs, either they're going to be far commuting, working poor, or they're going to be the young kids who live in this affluent community working them jobs.
yeah,
So it's not going to benefit the larger metropolis. Is not going to address employment shortages. It's not going to address giving livable wages uh, to people, because it's not designed for that.
yeah,
When you move into those places, to the suburbs, where they're deliberately trying to cut off from the urban metropolis, because that's what those are designed. Like I said, I saw it with the Pistons and the Lions, right? And then to rebrand it,
yeah.
they said, "Oh, we're going to come on back," because the Lions have been losing forever, right? Except for this year. So to rebrand it, let's try something new. We're going to get public dollars to build a new stadium. Then they give us this bullshit. We can attract better athletes. People are going to want to play for Detroit because look, we have this new stadium. I'm not sure how much of that shit is true or not, but it sounds like some bull crap to me.
No, I mean you're absolutely right. The Stanford study from I believe it was 8 years ago, um, literally tracked teams in municipalities and cities over the course of like 25 years, and
Mm-hmm.
there's only been one city that made money, okay, uh, from having a professional sports team, and I kid you not, 2016 Cleveland Cavaliers, the year they won the title. The
Mm-hmm.
city generated over about $30 million in revenue.
I can see, because for them it was probably such new interest, so the tourism related around to the games helped generate
Yeah,
that money.
I
It
mean,
was a trick. Because
honestly, it probably was the mix of LeBron. Everyone wants to see LeBron,
yeah.
right? And then you had the Golden State Warriors coming off of 2 straight titles
Hmm.
and, with the Splash Brothers and all that. I mean, that's great. But, I mean, people don't realize the Gateway Project, which built what is now Quicken Loans Arena,
Hmm.
Progressive Field, and kind of revamped downtown Cleveland, went like $3 billion over budget. And
Hmm.
Cleveland won't be done paying off those loans, I think, for another 15 or 20 years. And you got to think, Progressive's been open since 95. I mean, it's ridiculous. Um,
I
now, don't
want
get
to
me,
tell your friend, somebody said NBA players only want to play in LA, Miami, or Texas teams. Really, it's Florida and LA. It's only LA teams because access to Hollywood to make millions of dollars in other venues. But most professional athletes actually they want to play in Florida because they got the favorable taxes, income taxes.
yeah, Florida and Texas have no state income tax.
So that's
Now,
why those states, Texas and Florida, and then LA for the Hollywood, but Texas and Florida, it's because of them taxes. And you'll hear people talking about it when they talk about trades and taking the pay cut to go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But now they getting 100% of their money, but they was in California where they was only getting 30% of their money because of the income tax.
yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. People don't realize when you're a professional athlete on Monday, when you're say you the Heat, you're not playing. But on Tuesday, when you're in Charlotte,
Mm.
you're paying 8% state tax in North Carolina state tax, right? Like that's just it depends on where you play on the day. Um,
Yeah.
but see, and that's brings me to like another thing, right? If you've got an ownership group who's like, hey man, I need a new stadium. Like you said, we want to draw these players in so I can make this team better, so we can be competitive and I can win titles, which we know 90% of it's bullshit because these owners don't want to win titles. They want to make money,
Mhm.
right? Like Joe Lacob, who owns the Warriors, I believe he wants to win titles because that guy has been over the cap in the NBA for 5 years, and he has to pay out $4 for every dollar he's over now. It's like $400 million check. He writes directly to the NBA now, and because he wants to
Mhm.
win. Okay, I get it, right? But we know 90% of these owners don't give a shit. Like, I mean, the Twins owner for years, Carl Polhad, he just took that
Mhm.
revenue sharing money and sat on it. And it got to the
Mhm.
point where Major League Baseball, remember, was going to contract the Twins and the Montreal Expos at one point.
Yeah.
But, that didn't happen. The Expos ended up moving to DC, becoming the Nationals, and the Twins got a stay of execution. But if right, you're not really going to pump money into the team, like whether it be salary or, practice facilities or coaching staff or whatever it is, right? And that you want that concession money. You want that parking money, right? You want all those things. If you're saving money on the team side, why aren't you putting more money into the stadium? So you can get those things. Like, honestly, I don't understand how city councils, mayors, uh, county oversight commissions, and even governors, like Youngkin, governor of Virginia, has already said, I will kick in money for this stadium in Alexandria. You're paying $1,900 less per student in public schools, but you're willing to help foot the bill for $1 billion priorities, right?
I
But
mean, and voters fall for it. The optics. Oh, look what they did. They brought this stadium here. They brought this professional franchise here. We've never had one here. It's the optics. It's the bait and switch. But when people aren't informed, right, they don't realize. I mean, if we're being honest, this new generation, they're way more savvier. So I want to make that distinction. These 18, 19, 20, 22-year old, this new generation, they may be more pay attention more to that or be more aware because they seem to pay attention to more things, even if it's not important, but they're paying attention to more things,
yeah,
right? But my generation, I was born in 75, graduated high school in 93. we didn't pay much attention or understand what was going on. It was talking about public funds to build a new stadium. We wasn't really making those connections, right? We were viewing it in terms of maybe tax cuts or something, meaning that they get tax breaks to build this stadium or whatever. We didn't
Yeah.
completely. I think these younger generation understand that aspect much more at their age than my generation did when we were their age. So they may call that out. They may vote against it or vote people out, depending on the political processes used to get the public funds approved, right? Because in some instances they'll do a bit of ballot initiative, a millage. In other places it'd
Yep.
be some deal cut in the state legislature when they pass some type of thing, right? So it depends on how it happens, or a city council make a resolution committing certain amount of money over a certain amount of years or whatever the case may be. But I think these younger people are more on it. They appreciate urban spaces much differently than my generation. My generation, our goal was to run away from urban spaces. That's how you made it. I was just talking to somebody about that the other night. Like, that was a sign that you made it by leaving the community, right? But this generation, they're more so talking about physically transforming the community, urban farming, urban gardening, urban green spaces, green spacing. They will be more, they're more predisposed already to oppose
Yeah.
and organize themselves and people in the community against some of these things, right? They're naturally to put some hope in it, and to go back to something you were saying. Well, what do we do? How do we stop it? It's going to be the young people that figure that out, and I think they're going to figure it out sooner than later. you know?
Yeah. Yeah. They have. I mean, I noticed that when I was like, I went to my freshman year, I was 35 years old, and seeing how active, the younger students were, I was like, holy shit, man. Like I couldn't imagine doing that when I was 18 or 19. Now all day long. I mean, granted, I got to like ice myself down afterwards and take like 38 ibuprofen, but you know, I think you're absolutely correct on that note. Um, but it's just I don't think this is going to stop. And I don't, I never thought I'd hear myself say this, but I actually feel bad for Vegas, who's going to be on the hook for not one, not two, but three stadiums
Mhm.
in the span of like 10 years.
Indeed.
Like,
This
I
is a
understand.
place that already has poor infrastructure,
Yeah. Oh, it's
limited,
absolute shit.
yeah, limited amenities. I have friends that live in Las Vegas. They don't live on the strip. They live in the real town of Las, where it gets
Yeah.
dark, dark, the underbelly, if you want to.
Yeah.
All them service workers got to live somewhere, and they're
Yeah.
not making a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know
Vastly
what
underpaid for a place that has artificially inflated property values because of
I
billionaire casino owners,
Yep.
you know?
Yep. So yeah, I mean that's definitely, it's going to implode. It's going to implode, and poverty and crime is already bad in Las Vegas. It's going to skyrocket because it's going to implode. They're going to be able to provide less and less services, and much of their revenue they rely on tax money off of the service industry and fines, criminal fines for all the visitors that come there and leave with a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, yeah. I mean, DC Joe Black brought up a good point. But what if we are organized, but just like Cop City and ATL, local government just ignores the people and improves development and construction? Now, I'm going to tell you right now, Joe, Cop City, this is going to kind of get off topic, but I mean, I don't think you mind, Dave.
No,
Cop
let's go.
City, yeah, Cop City is part of the military industrial complex. That's exactly what it was built for. The company that built it built Mount Cities and multiple military installations. They're going to have military contracted trainers
Mhm.
there, because this is all part and parcel of what we're seeing. How our it was a kind of creeping fascism, but we're just going full on sliding into it now,
Yes.
where we have cops that are funded and equipped like the military,
Yes.
uh, and their primary reason is to be pointed directly at the people. I don't think there was ever a way to stop that, honestly.
Mhm. I
Now,
mean,
when
it had that federal, like you said, it had the underlying unspoken federal support. If I'm not mistaken, and you mentioned the military contractors training stuff, I could be mistaken, but I'm almost certain I'm true that they even had IDF soldiers there training for
oh
the
yeah, yeah, absolutely, they had active duty IDF personnel,
yeah,
mostly to cover what they're calling riot training.
yes, urban warfare.
Yeah,
Urban
uh,
warfare. That's why when the lady, one of the sisters from the squad, when she gave a talk from the floor in Congress, she pointed out, no, it's not. They are training our police officers. They're using the same equipment. We're sending them the same equipment that they're training our officers in to engage our citizens on the street, just like in Palestine. Same thing in Ferguson, Missouri.
yeah,
It's direct links. Atlanta has always, well, I can't say always, for probably about 80 years, has been a military industrial complex city. You know, people don't pay attention. Just ride the MARTA. You'll be like, man, there's a lot of bases right here in the city or right outside of Atlanta. Military bases. You know, just ride the MARTA. Fort McPherson, all these bases. Just, you know, not even getting down to Augusta, Fort Stewart, and all that. We're just talking about right there. Fulton County, DeKalb County, right there. It is a military industrial complex city, has been for about 80 years, if not longer, to be honest. You know. So yeah, the cop city, but they still fighting it. When I was there this summer, people was coming up to me to get me to sign petitions, but I wasn't I'm not a registered voter there, so me signing a petition wasn't gonna help them. But they still out there trying to do something with it though.
yeah. I mean, and I give the protesters a lot of credit. Like it takes a lot of balls to sit there and take that kind of abuse for as long as they have.
Mhm.
Um, but the fact of the matter is, like I was saying, I don't think you stop. Like it's not in the cards. The federal government wanted to build as well because they're going to
Yes.
use that training facility as well for. It could be secret side, of special operations units. We're going to be training there. It is literally the largest Mount
Mhm.
city, and Mount is military operations in urban terrain, or essentially city fighting. It's very hard to train for on military installations. I would know. I served a long time, so they build specific training centers, and honestly, Cop City was going to be it. Um, but when we were talking about publicly funded sports stadiums, I think Dave, you hit the nail on the head. Younger people are voting now, and I'm not gonna lie, I like what they're doing. Where they're like, you know what, if the federal government's just gonna fuck us, fine, we won't cast a vote there, but we're gonna be very active in our local politics, which I
Mhm.
think honestly makes more sense because at the federal level, not a lot of difference between Republicans and Democrats when you're not talking about kind of the culture war type of stuff. Um,
Mhm.
but this could torpedo a lot of people in Virginia. Somebody brought up that a lot of people in Alexandria don't want the stadium. I think there's some loud people that don't want the stadium, but I think the people in power and the money behind those people, they want it, and they will do whatever it takes to get it. And
Mhm.
that probably includes what we would think dropping the tax rate,
Mhm.
putting like tax incentives, like you won't have to pay city or city tax for a certain amount of years. Um,
Mhm.
Maybe getting some of those, the TGI Fridays and the Buffalo Wild Wings that come down to the multi-purpose entertainment district.
Mhm.
They're those corporations don't have to pay it either. Um, but yeah, I mean, this could cost because of the stadium, it could cause Virginia to swing a whole other way,
Yeah.
which I think would be great. I mean, honestly, I think we're at the point now where, you know, our parents really hosed us as far as their poor voting records and putting people like Reagan into
Mhm.
power. Um, but, the fact of the matter is we're seeing more and more calls for a more robust, safety net. We're seeing more calls to really do away with the two-party system, which I
Mhm.
think we'll have to fight that one for a long time because the people in power are not going to want to give up their seats. But people are, we're done. We're fed up with the status quo.
Mhm.
Um, but like it's odd because like when I talk to other leftists, we talk, I think sport is a great way to organize. It
Mhm.
gives kids an outlet to get together with other kids. And I'm not saying start a football team because that's stupid expensive, but you know what you can do? Basketball and soccer, bam, cheap,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Indeed, indeed.
What if you are having problems like getting your kid into, the local little league or the AAU, like, and I've asked this question to a couple people, why aren't we starting our own sports leagues? Why aren't we starting our own charter schools? If the
Mhm.
state is going to continue to cut public education, why aren't leftists starting our own charter schools? Because the state's just cutting checks to, I
Yeah,
mean,
no, definitely. Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
these are things we have to start looking at. I really believe if we want to really start making a difference, you and I talked extensively on You Don't Know History about the Panthers social programs. Well, if we start leaning into like starting our own schools and our own sports leagues, um,
Mhm.
that would go a long way.
Mhm.
I really think giving people community is
It did.
important.
It's
That's what
uh, it's something that's happening as a result of current trends in politics. Ron DeSantis out of Florida, for example, with the attacks on education. So we're seeing the reemergence of community people organizing freedom schools. At this stage, they're not designed to replace K through 12. They're more so designed like the old freedom schools or like Hebrew school for Jewish Americans, right? To teach, in their case, Jewish history, culture, identity, right? They're starting them now, restarting them for African American culture and history because of the assaults in schools. And I know that firsthand because an organization that I'm on the executive board of, when we had our conference in Jacksonville, Florida in October, that was one of our resolutions to support them and help create more because they had started a couple of them in Florida because of the legislation and stuff that DeSantis is playing. So leftists, we could start with that model: political education. You know what I'm saying, uh, and culture as political. So culture as political, or spaces in culture that create political spaces. Right, that's a space that they can operate in, and it's going to become more necessary. And this is why, because one thing we haven't hit on, and it's directly related, it's not related into the teams, ownerships, clubs that are trying to take their stadium, build new stadiums in the suburbs, but those that are want new stadiums rebuilt in the urban areas, or to build new stadiums in the urban areas, right? Because those things are happening as
Oh
well,
yeah,
right? You had the
yes,
Georgia Dome, then they built the Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
hmm
We talked about the Pistons and the Lions, and then we could talk about other places where that's what they're doing, right? I mean, they did it in New York, New Jersey, right? If I'm not mistaken, they built it right next door. In fact,
yep,
of the old one, right? Is what we're seeing is a reverse of what began really at the turn of the old century, right? Early 1900s, right? The downtown areas became slums because that's where the manufacturing was, right? That's where the pollution, the dirt, the noise, you want to live away from the urban center. Now, over the last 20 years, in this increasing reverse thing, the happenings is now at the urban center, and they're displacing those former residents, those poor people that were trapped in those slums. They're displacing them to these rural areas and these pockets of rural slums or suburban slums, right? Which doesn't seem intuitive, but it is, because they've used uh, government programming to do it. Section 8 housing.
Yep.
Detroit, you cannot get a Section 8 voucher in the city of Detroit. You can get one in Wayne County, though. That's the county that Detroit is in. But
Yeah.
in the city of Detroit, you can't. So, and then to get certain federal monies, these municipalities, these towns and cities, right? They have to have at least one income-based housing development in their municipality to receive certain federal funds. So you will see in a affluent area, right? And then you'll see this one apartment complex where all the ghetto people live at, for lack of a better way to put it. Regardless what they look like, immigrants, black people, poor white people, Hispanic, Chicano, no matter what they look like, but you're gonna see them
Yeah.
there. And so we're going to start seeing that more rise of that, where it's going to turn to the suburban areas outside of the super affluent ones. They're going to amount to becoming suburban slums and downtown and the city proper, midtowns, downtowns. They're going to come up with all these fancy names. That's going to be the place to be all of a
Yeah.
sudden. And then they want these amenities for these people there to draw them there, right? Oh, who doesn't want to live in downtown Detroit now? 25 years ago, nobody wanted to live in
Oh
fucking
yeah.
downtown.
Yeah. It's just like, you know, it's weird. I guess like the 21st century gentrification, the creep, because
Mm-hmm.
it kind of came out of nowhere. It hit Brooklyn first, and you're like, of
Mm-hmm.
all places, Brooklyn, New York, really? Okay. You see housing prices go through the roof. And then they started a westward creep. And I really noticed it when I was a kid. It had just started in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
And now, you have sections of Pittsburgh where you're just like, holy shit, it's gorgeous. Not that Pittsburgh wasn't cool to begin with. Pittsburgh's a rad town. It was a Rust Belt city,
Yep.
like manufacturing and steel work abandoned us, and we've been
Yeah.
banding together to try to survive since. It hit
Mhm.
Cleveland, dude. It beat up. I mean, it really took off in Chicago.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and
So now
honestly, that
what you
probably had
yeah,
a lot to do.
with
I
that,
think it
is
probably
you're
had a lot more.
seeing new people, they got displaced. So I'll be in Detroit over the last couple of years, hanging downtown Detroit, home back in Michigan for a couple of weeks in the summer. Person sitting next to me at the bar. I'm a friendly ass guy. Hey, what brings you to Detroit? Oh, I live here. Oh, you live here? That's interesting. Where you live? Oh, I live up the street around the corner. Oh, dig that. I remember when that used to be where all the rock stars hung out. I'm not talking about people with a band. I'm talking about
Yeah.
crackheads, prostitutes, the rock stars, right? And I'm like, well, where'd y'all move from? Brooklyn. They got priced out and moved to other places gentrifying. So some of the gentrifiers got gentrified they damn self, and they then spread out throughout the Midwest. So you seeing a lot of them in Cleveland. They from Connecticut. They
Yeah.
from New York, getting displaced, and then they go and gentrify those other areas because they've gotten displaced by the rise in property costs and property taxes and stuff. It's a very insidious process.
Yeah. The gentrification snowball's awful.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because you know, you got to think before it would kind of get to where it wanted to be, and it just kind of stood pat there, right? And kind of
Mm-hmm.
build up a center. And now it's like you said, well, it's too expensive for me to live in Brooklyn. I'm going to go to Pittsburgh. Now it's too expensive for me to live in Pittsburgh. I'm going to Cleveland, going
Yep.
from Cleveland to Chicago. I mean, you're seeing it really bad in St. Louis now,
Yep.
Omaha,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, holy shit. Like it's really just going to roll across until like it meets the massive gentrification in California,
Mm-hmm.
to where the rest of us who don't have gentrifier money are just like, where the hell am I going to eat, and where the hell am I going to live?
Yeah.
uh, and at that point, who knows what the hell's going on. um but yeah, I mean, to kind of get back and tie this one off, everybody, it's I don't think the stadium issue is going to be one that just goes away soon. I think it'll actually get worse, because
Mm-hmm.
after SoFi Stadium in LA was built, with Kroenke. That was a privately financed stadium, and everybody, I use that term loosely because Kroenke had to get a $500 million loan from the NFL and had special tax incentives from Inglewood and the county to finish construction, right? So, it's that topped out at $5 billion, the most expensive stadium built in the world right now. I know some people are gonna be like, well, what about World Cup? Well, that's multiple stadiums. That's always gonna be more. But when we're
Yeah.
talking one, SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles is the most expensive stadium ever built. And that is the standard. Like we saw with Atlanta moving from Turner Field, or whatever they called it before going into SunTrust and now Truist Stadium. That was 20 something years, right?
Mhm.
And the price tags for these things just keep going higher and higher and higher. And the shelf lives of these stadiums keep getting lower and lower and lower. And
Mhm.
every time they build one of these things, we see a massive reduction in population. We see a massive reduction in private, small businesses. Um,
Mhm.
we see, essentially displacement of people. And they build these, and they know I'm only going to get it for 20 to 25 years, and it's going to
Mhm.
be time to go someplace else and displace people.
Yep.
Um, if they're going to stay in our urban areas, or
Mhm.
they go out to the burbs and where there is space to just build these,
Yep.
multi-use entertainment areas, you
Mhm.
know, like in, but even
Can we
then the
get a
price,
generation? That's all they
yeah,
want. One generation, and then they'll move back to the urban area after that, just like with the Pistons and the in the Lions, right? One generation, right? That's what they'll get. A kid is born, a affluent family moves into that community. A kid is born. By the time that kid is 2 years into college or 2 years in the military, right? They tearing that stadium down and building another.
yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and the thing is, it's like how that this is like a constant debt load that if you and I were like if it was ours, um, we're our shit's in collections and they're
Yeah.
garnishing our tax returns, right?
Yeah.
Like like that's how it
Yeah.
is, you
Yes.
know. But these cities just continually carry this load. Um, so for me, it's like at what point, and I'm gonna get a little nerdy here, everybody. At what point are the credit ratings for these cities downgraded,
Mhm.
right?
But
Because
see, the
every city,
irony of it all, Detroit filed bankruptcy and then still financed them stadiums.
yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Like I know it was under what Kwame Kilpatrick, right? That
Yeah.
that they that right after he was indicted.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
um,
And
but
they tried to blame the lawsuits that he incurred as a major reason. They didn't discuss in the media all those things, excuse me, that they did using public dollars to finance the construction of those casinos
that's a
and
that's a
buildings.
whole. I think. Hey JB, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I really do. Um, but no, that's another big thing. The way gambling is tied to sports now,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
That is
Yep.
also driving this because you know what's at SoFi? A betting desk.
Oh, wow. Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
I like in Ohio, there's legalized sports gambling. So you could literally, before you go to Progressive or go to Brown Stadium, you can hit the Jack Casino and put your bets down. And then
Hmm.
literally hop on the trolley 5 minutes later, you're at Brown Stadium, or you just walk across the street to Quicken Loans or Progressive, right?
Hmm.
Like
Yep.
I think that is going to be another big part of these multi-entertainment areas is
Hmm.
as states start legalizing sports gambling, you're
Hmm.
gonna see books in these
Yeah.
areas,
Yeah.
you know, because you got
Hmm.
to think FanDuel and DraftKings, are your daily fantasy sports betting,
Hmm.
ridiculously influential in the sports world now, right?
Yes.
But how much money can these cities start generating if I want to put down one of those stupid prop bets like, hey, how many times are going to show the scoreboard on the TV? Like, which is a
Yeah.
prop bet you could put down during the Super Bowl.
Mhm.
Like there's so much money to be made for that. And I think
Mhm.
if a city's like, well, in these multi, use entertainment areas, can we put a
Mhm.
book? Oh, we can? Okay, definitely. We're going to write this check. How much do you need for this stadium? Because all they're seeing is money generated, but not the debt load they have to carry in order to do it.
Exactly. 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 And that's government. That's our neoliberal government. Debt, kick it down the can, kick it down the road, kick it down the road. We ain't got money to help y'all, as Tupac say. Uh, got money for wars, but can't feed the poor. We ain't had
Yep.
no money, and all of a sudden we got all these trillions of dollars for these wars that's going on in Ukraine and in Palestine. We got money. All of a sudden, got money. They're printing money. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Just kicking the can down the road, and that's what these cities are doing. They expect, and I know you're about to wrap it up, but they're banking on public education to collapse. That's I'm not a conspiracy theorist, so I'm not gonna say it's designed to keep one group of people down. By default, it's going to keep one group of people, a certain segment of the
Yep.
population, down. By default, right? It's going poor people, working class people, working poor. It's going to keep them down because they're not going to be able to afford what will become supplemental education to prepare their children to compete to go to college. You know what I'm saying? They're
I mean, we're
counting.
already seeing it. We're already seeing it like for
Yeah.
ACT and SAT prep.
Yes.
Those
Yes.
courses are ridiculous. And the
Mhm.
way the way the United States college model is, which is to generate profit,
Yep.
you know, um, because let's face it, school administrators, one, detest the faculty there that are trying to do their jobs and educate the next generation of young Americans.
Mhm.
But administrators look at every one of us like we're ATMs.
Yes, yes.
Um,
And they
you
use a
know,
consumer model. And people like me as faculty, we hate when administrators, chancellors, presidents, depending on what system you in, when we hear them say shit like this to the student. You are a consumer, right? One, I'm glad they say it because it lets me know where their minds are at. But
yep,
two, it also reveals the educational model, what we got. That's why all this rising student loan debt, all this other stuff, because it's many different leeches feeding off that system, getting wealthy, remaining wealthy, and all that. But then it sends the wrong message to the student, where students now they ain't got a clue what the fuck education is for. It ain't about self-improvement, becoming a better person, better citizen. No, it's simply about let me get this piece of paper to get a job to work for somebody. That's really
yep,
because it's transactional. I pay your salary, so you supposed to pass me. You ain't came to nan class, but you expecting to get a passing grade because you paid your tuition. And I dig it because they got to leave with all that fucking debt. You know what I'm saying? But yeah,
yep,
but I feel your subscriber JB when he says public schools have already collapsed, but it isn't a complete collapse yet. It's not a complete collapse. It's not understood that if you go into public schools, it's like this. I don't know if they did this in your school, JB or Mac. They certainly did it in schools when I was growing up, where they tracked people, right? College prep, general.
yep.
General meaning you was the, excuse my language, I'm just gonna say it how it is. The general was for the niggas that was going to the army or prison.
Yeah,
or if
we had a vocational program.
yeah,
So
and if
like
they
if
was
you
lucky,
weren't tracking academics, they'd be like, hey man, how about welding?
yes.
Or how about automotive mechanic? Or I think there
Mhm.
was like there were four total, but
Now,
like it gave a lot of
when you get certification to leave with your journeyman's license, and all you had to do was your apprenticeship, now that was good when they was doing vocational
yep,
ed, electricians, plumbers, and all that. But they cut that, so it was simply college prep in general. You know what I'm saying? You had shot, but you wasn't leaving there but nothing but with the damn ashtray or a fucking screwdriver that you made, the toolbox.
yep,
You wasn't leaving with no certifications or anything like that, right?
yep,
Particularly in a place like Detroit, where that was a big thing. The emperor from Japan, in 1920s came over to Detroit, Michigan to look at their school model, because that's was the big thing in their school model, was that vocational education, and people were leaving out of high school with those certifications and licensures and stuff, right? But it's going to be public school is general ed, private schools, charter schools that you're going to pay some money on top of whatever state allocates that's following you. Then you're going to got the money to pay some money on top of that. That's how
Yep.
they're going to do the charter schools, where they're going to be private schools, is what I fear. And then that's going to be the college prep, and the public schools is just going to be the people that's going to go to the army or prison.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the shitty thing. The way the education system is now, it's we need to prep you to be pumped back into the economy to work these menial jobs.
Yep.
And like you said, the specialized, ACT, SAT prep, case in point, the GRE and the LSAT.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I, if I plan on pursuing history as a PhD, why am I taking a math portion
Mm-hmm.
to get into graduate school?
Mm-hmm.
They're gatekeeping mechanisms. So if you don't have the money to pay for, the prep, or, the specialized prep or the tutor, which I've seen, just absolutely ridiculous. You can't go, and it makes no sense. Absolutely no sense.
Anybody will tell you. You've taken both the GRE and the LSAT. I too have taken both the GRE and the LSAT. Everybody that I know that's an attorney, I met my ex-wife when she was in law school. So her and all her friends told me flat out, the LSAT has no bearing on what you're going to do in law school.
Yeah.
It don't even test for that. It's testing for something else. The GRE, like you mentioned with the math, if you're going into history, right? I mean, the only thing that the GRE can measure in my fields, right? And you got a bachelor's in history, I got a PhD in history, is really only the writing section. The
Yeah.
word associations, that don't even help. That's just memorizing some shit. I couldn't afford the class, so I bought a GRE prep book. All the prep book was teaching me was fucking strategies to beat the test. It was just all that shit is just testing your knowledge of the strategy for the test.
Yeah. I mean, that goes back to what you were saying, though. We're gonna have these. We're gonna have an educational system where if you can pay to advance, you can, and if you can't, you're just supposed to be rolled in to work these menial labor jobs. I think that's what I find hilarious with all the Elon Musk dick riders. They're like, he's gonna get us to Mars. No, he's gonna get the rich people to Mars.
Guaranteed. What the hell they think?
Right?
Fuck, they gonna take your broke ass with them to Mars for? They trying to leave you here.
Or they might take your broke ass to Mars, and you're just gonna be the guy that. Yep. That's what you're gonna do. You're not gonna be having dinner with Elon, and new Tesla, the capital city of Mars. Okay, you're gonna be digging ditches. You're gonna be cleaning toilets. You're gonna be shining shoes, man. Like you're not gonna be one of the chosen few.
They better watch some sci-fi and see how that shit go. It was an episode. Yep. Oh man, I can't remember which. It might have been Voyager. Might have been Voyager, and they ass got captured by this alien race, and they wiped their memory, and they had their ass working in the bottom of a city, underground in the mine, and all the rich people in that city of that alien race lived above it in this bubble, right? They didn't know the motherfuckers was down there working except for a certain group of the elite who was in charge of that, and the people that was down there working didn't even know it was a civilization above them. That's what they dumbass gonna be doing on Mars, talking about Elon Musk. They ass gonna be at the bottom of the fucking mine on Mars.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is that this libertarian vision of what Mars is gonna be. I've told people, like, no, it's gonna be like the Matt Damon movie Elysium. We're gonna be down here, like living in trash cans. And like all the rich people are going to be on Mars just living it up, like.
Yes. You're going to be like, where Wally at?
Yeah. At this point, this is.
Yes. And that's what they did to the cities. Now they trying to reclaim the cities. That's what they did to the cities. They took all the resources out, right? They made them undesirable to go, building them stadiums in the suburbs. I mean, them white people was mad as fuck at Atlanta. We didn't even address that real elephant in the room. They mad as hell. They like these Negroes and took over this shit, and they just got a nigga palooza. They just going crazy in Atlanta, right? I mean, they like, man, we got to get away from them. But my big 6-figure job is in the Atlanta metro area, so we got to still live around here. But we got to have our own thing. I'm tired of going down there and Ray trying to sell me a damn T-shirt. Billy Bob drunk as hell, sleeping on the fucking ground. I'm tired of all this shit. I don't feel comfortable taking my kids to the Braves game.
See, like, and that's what kills me. I went to Cleveland last year in September, and I caught a couple Guardians games, and you know, there are a lot of homeless around the stadium. But let's face it, it's because the state decided to pay for a stadium rather than mental health services or continuing.
Shelters. Yeah.
Yeah. Down here in North Carolina, when they closed Dorothea Dix, which was a mental hospital, everyone, and a continuing education center for people with developmental disabilities, like adults, they just threw them out, literally threw them out. And they've been on the streets since. And it's been getting so cold down here in North Carolina, which really, it's been kind of bizarrely cold. We had homeless people hopping on the Greyhound in downtown Fayetteville just to go up to Raleigh to maybe get into a shelter. Maybe.
Exactly.
And that's the thing. If we have money, and I'm using the royal we, not the us we, if we have money for stadiums, how do we not have money for shelters to make sure people aren't freezing to death?
Indeed. Why can't we finance public dollars to finance one of those dilapidated buildings? Now they done turned into a fucking moose jaw in downtown Detroit. Why couldn't they public financing to renovate one of them buildings for a homeless shelter, a temporary shelter, a seasonal shelter? In Michigan, it gets crucial. You from Ohio, you from Cleveland. Yep. Man, them motherfuckers be dying every winter just because they's laying on the bench and freeze to death. You know what I'm saying? The shit is ridiculous. But they about to build this brand new ass fucking stadium. Kid Rock got a fucking restaurant. I think they made him close it because he was on that bullshit. But nonetheless, you know what I'm saying. These people, man, it's wild. And don't get me wrong, I get frustrated too. I had to tell some mugs when I'm downtown Detroit smoking a cigarette outside the bar or restaurant. I'm like, man, I gave you $2 before. Don't ask me no fucking more. Now you're getting on my nerves because you're tripping. Because they got mental health issues and they on some other shit because they need to be getting help, but they abandoned on the streets. So don't get me wrong, I'm not going to act holier than thou. I too get frustrated, but because I understand one and two of your subscribers mentioned, lumping proletariat. Yes, I identify with that group in the dichotomy of things. People say you're a college professor. Well, the way money getting paid now, brother, according to these damn MAGA ass crackers, I'm not even middle class, bro, because I don't make $400K a year. I don't make $100K a year. So I'm at best working class. But I view myself because of my background, and I do identify with the lumping proletariat, although I recognize that I'm not as lumping as others. But I mean, so I view these homeless people by these stadiums and stuff. I had empathy for them because I see that could have been me or still could be me. All it takes is 1 or 2 bad months or something to go wrong at my job. And now I'm 1 or 2 months without a job and I'm fucked because these people will evict you where I'm at in North Carolina. If you mention rent due the 1st, by the 7th, they ain't got that money, you getting an eviction notice. I'm like, damn, I ain't used to this. I thought a motherfucker get 30 days or some shit. Like, what the fuck? I just forgot, man. That's all. I actually got the money. I just literally got lazy and was like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow and forgot type shit, right?
Yeah.
You know,
And
so
that's the
yeah.
thing, man. We are, the fact of the matter is, it's, I love the history program at Pembroke, and it
Mhm.
killed me when I found out one of my favorite professors, who was an adjunct, literally only got a 364-day contract and had to interview for his same job just to
Mhm.
keep it. That
Yeah.
makes, and the thing is, everybody, you have to realize, outside of STEM and business, that is every professor in the arts right now,
Mhm.
justifying their job so they can
Yep.
keep it,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
because
Yep.
these schools see STEM and business, and Pembroke is guilty as shit of this. Yep, with that new business. Pembroke just built one of only the third accredited business school in the state of North Carolina.
I saw
Uh,
it in November, the first time I had been back since I moved. My fraternity had a leadership conference down there, so I rode down with one of my undergraduate fraternity brothers to that 5 hour fucking drive, and they was hosting it in the new business school. So when I
mhm.
saw the building address on the stuff, I'm like, man, what the fuck is this? I ain't never heard of this building. You show this the right address? Shit, we pull up, and then I saw the new building
Mhm.
because it's right there by what was the building my office used to be in?
Right there by Dial.
Yes, right next to Dial. Yes, yes,
Yep.
yes, yes. I saw it. I'm like, wow, they got somebody donated some money or whatever the hell.
Oh yeah, yeah. All told, $26 million, all told.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, everybody, that's the episode for today. I hope it gave you something to think about, because um, we're failing as a society when we decide that we're going to justify, the circus and bread aspect of control. And I'm guilty of it. I love sports. I talk about sports all the time. I love sports.
Mhm.
Um, but it doesn't mean that I don't see kind of like the seedy side to this, especially when I see people on the streets. I see people struggling to make ends meet. I see people, schools closing. I see, public health clinics closing. I see all these things, these, public works and public programs being cut.
Mhm.
Also, a group of millionaires, and I believe athletes should get paid. They're the ones out there putting their very health at risk, for
Mhm.
my enjoyment. But they are millionaires. Not
Yes.
all of them, but they make significantly more money than
Mhm.
everybody that is watching this program right now and is going to listen to this program,
Yep.
right? They
Yep.
make significantly more than us. We have to stop catering to them. Like,
Mhm.
I think that's a good way to kind of like tie this one off. We have to stop and get back to taking care of community.
Mhm.
But Dave, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it, man. It's
Having me.
good to sit here and chew the fat and actually talk about some important shit with you. Remember, everybody, please hit the subscribe button. Please become a patron. Please continue to listen. We're doing this so we can help uh, kind of spur good conversation, learn something, and occasionally laugh at a dick and fart joke. It just happens sometimes during conversation. But
Mhm.
everybody, thank you so much for listening. And, we're out.
Indeed. Thank you. Peace.